Historically, stories and storytelling have been an important part of pretty much every culture. From parchment paper, ancient scrolls, song and dance and language. They're the ways that we pass down tradition, create connection, share knowledge, and communicate beliefs. Sometimes stories are pure entertainment. They can make us laugh or cry. They can evoke emotions like anger and joy. And they can teach us principles like faith and justice and wisdom. For me, storytelling has always been an important part of my life and my family's life. I grew up spending my summers at my grandparents' farm in rural Virginia. There's Virginia. There was no TV, no video games, only stories. Some of my best memories were sitting with my cousins at my grandfather's feet, and just for a moment, we felt like we were sitting right in the cockpit of his World War II Mustang. Imagine my disappointment when years later my mother told me that your grandfather never went to war because he was a farmer. But there is one story that I do tell students most often, so I know a few of you have heard this, so you'll have to sit through it again. And the reason I want to tell it is because I think it communicates a little bit more about me, but it also helps you navigate college and life. So in 1991, I started teaching at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College with only a bachelor's degree in mathematics. Yeah, there's Mississippi. But because of that, I did not have the credentials to teach the upper level math classes like I wanted to. I needed a master's degree for that, and in those days, accessibility to graduate level classes was pretty slim. We had no online classes, email did not exist. And so a few years went by, and about the time I wanted to go back to college, something completely amazing happened. My local campus of the University of Southern Mississippi, see, quite a few of you are going to USM. USM opened a PhD program in computational sciences, and at the specific request of the NASA Space Center, which was located a few towns over from campus. And the program itself, it sort of offered this combination of graduate level math, computer science, and engineering classes. So I thought, this is my chance. This is my chance to keep my day job at the college and go to school at night and get classes that would count toward a master's degree in mathematics. It was a new program. It had about 8 to 10 engineers and scientists from NASA and me, the community college faculty member. So the first class offered in the program was advanced calculus. Now, advanced calculus was sort of a primer, but it was a prerequisite to every other class in the program. Basically, without this class, you were not able to understand the math inside of all the other classes. So on the first day of class, the instructor, Dr. Joseph Kolobal, he hands out a sheet of paper with 10 problems on it. And he says to everyone, this is your final exam. It is due at the end of the semester. There will be no other grades, only discussion, questions, and lecture. So then after that, he turns around and he kind of proceeds into his first lecture. I was like, okay, So that first week, I took that exam, and right away, I got 3 of the problems. And I was feeling pretty good about that. And several weeks went by, and I got another 2 problems. And then so 3 of the 5 remaining problems, I didn't even understand the questions. And so I did start to focus on the 2 problems that at least I understood what the questions were asking. So weeks went by, and during that time, I drove to the main campus of USM in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I went to the library and I sat there all day and I pulled all the books off the shelf. I got all the articles that I could get, anything I could get my hands on to really understand the analysis of similar problems. So time was marching on, and if you're keeping up with the math in this math story, I had 5 solidly. I thought I had made good progress on 1 more, and a little bit of progress on another. So in my mind, I had like this 50 to 65% of this exam. So to be honest with you, I was completely in a panic. I didn't know my classmates. I didn't see them outside of class. And with this being the final exam, I really didn't think that collaboration was really appropriate anyway. So I told myself, you know, this is the end. If you can't pass this class, you can't pass any of the other classes. So I think you should probably drop out. And so I just set to do just that. But in those days, withdrawal forms were not very accessible either, thank goodness. They weren't online. You know, dates had passed, and I needed permission to withdraw from this class. So I went to see Dr. Kolobal for his signature and explained to him my problems with the exam. And he listened to me, and he said, let me see that exam, and he was looking at it. And then he said, my apologies, I thought I told everyone. Only half the problems on this exam have ever been solved. The other half, I know, I was like, he goes, I just wanted to see what you guys would do with the other half, because I'm working on them too, and I was so relieved. And I'm like, and there's more to the story. Before final exams were due, Dr. Kolobal called me and he said, I need your permission to remove you from the curve of the class. And I was like, sure, but I don't understand why you would have to do that. And he said, if I don't remove you, everyone else is going to fail the class. And I was like, yes. Yes. So after that, I had two jobs. I had my day job teaching at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, and then I had another job as Dr. Kolobal's graduate research assistant. And that research job came with a full tuition ride for my entire master's degree. And thank you. Some stories have good endings, right? But I would go on to take another 60 hours in upper-level math and statistics classes. Now the story, think about the story I was telling myself in my head. It almost derailed me from the most important opportunity of my career. Because yes, I learned a lot of math with Dr. Kolobal. He was a brilliant man, 7 languages. I mean, he was just the top mentor for me. But the skill set I learned under him was how to program. And that skill set me up for a career in database administration, and that is what put me on the path to work for Phi Theta Kappa. Now, when you hear this story, this is not a story of persistence. The takeaway from this story is to understand that the stories you tell yourself about yourself are the most important ones. They are. So when you're listening to yourself, I hear, I'm not ready. I don't have time. I don't stand a chance. I'm not good at taking tests. I don't interview well. I'm not smart enough. What if I fail? Does any of that sound familiar to you? The stories that you tell yourself, they don't only affect yourself, but they impact how you show up in the world and how open you are to people, to opportunities, and ideas. The stories you tell yourself become your reality. Now, many of your parents, or you're going to be, when I became a mom, storytelling was a very important part of my life and then the life of my 2 kids, Lauren and Lucas. When I was pregnant with Lauren, I began reading her the very first Harry Potter book, even before she was born. Now, growing up, Lauren loved to hear stories, and eventually she started creating and telling her own stories. Now, as an adult, Lauren is highly creative. She loves to read and write, and she's a really bright kid. And I like to think that storytelling had a lot to do with the beginning of that. Now, in my career, I'm a storyteller too, but I tell stories a little bit differently. I use numbers and data and statistics and charts and tables and figures. But as a mathematician and statistician, I've had the privilege of telling the stories of community college students just like you. And although my storytelling techniques are not considered traditional, I know that behind each and every data point that I show, there is a real life community college story behind it. Now, through data, I tell the stories of Phi Theta Kappa, of community college students, and the work of our community colleges. So here is one of my favorite stories I love to tell about PTK. This is our equity profile. It says so much about who we are. You may be the first in your family to attend college. English may not be your first language, and you may be from a low-income family. No matter your race, your ethnicity, male or female, no matter what data point I look at in Phi Theta Kappa, you all enjoy the same levels of success, and they are quite high. And our four-year college partners and universities, they like this data too, and they are here in person to recruit you, so you need to go see them. Now, this next one I love to show. This is a study by the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation of all students attending four-year colleges. All these students were in three categories. They were given 6 years to graduate. And if you notice, the community college students outperform all the other students. Now, that was actually all community college students, so PTK, you're much higher. Now, this statistic here is something that Phi Theta Kappa wants to put in front of every person in this nation. 49% of all bachelor's degrees in this country come from community college transfers. So far, we've managed to put this statistic in front of 22 million people and counting. So I know how competitive you guys are, so let's take a look at the top 5 states for bachelor's degree completion in the country. Texas, 75%. Yes, lots of things are bigger in Texas, right? Wyoming, 74%, Wyoming. Kansas, 70% of bachelor's degrees. Mississippi, my home state, 69%. And Oklahoma, 67%. Okay, so enough about the stories I tell. Let's talk about your story. But before I do that, let's cover some storytelling basics. The elements of stories and storytelling are something we learn when we're very young, probably in our homes or in primary school. Who remembers reading short stories in grade school and answering the following questions? Where was the story set? Who is telling the story? What is the story's plot? What is the story's theme? But no story element ranks above that of the cast of characters. Yes, yes. Now, in our lives, we play different roles in the stories of others, okay? Like in the lives of my family members and my friends and my coworkers, I play a supporting role or a minor role. I have been a victim, I have been a sidekick, I've been a hero, and maybe at times a villain or an antagonist. We have all played those roles at one moment or another. Are you the good guy? Are you the bad guy? Are you the villain or the hero? The answer to those questions is yes, you're all those things. To someone else, you are all those things. My point is that as a character in someone else's story, they have the power. You are a character in their story, and that story is being told from their point of view. Now, it gets complicated because we're all very aware of the characters we play in the stories of others. But if you're not careful, you can begin to take on their narrative about who you are, and what you're about. Even if that story is not based in reality, the stories that other people tell about us can begin to be the ones we tell about ourselves, even if they're not real. Walt Disney was told he lacked imagination. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Beyonce lost at Star Search. I know. Elvis Presley was fired after his first performance and was told he would be better suited as a truck driver. Albert Einstein had a significant speech delay and was expelled from school. These are just a few examples of people who were told by others that they weren't good enough, that they didn't have what it took, and that they would never make it. But guess what? They did, and they did in a big way. They didn't accept the labels and limitations that others put on them. They didn't believe the stories that other people were telling about who they were and what they were capable of. In the same way, you are not the story someone else wants to tell about you. Case in point, how much do we project to know about the stories of others that live in the spotlight? Athletes, politicians, actors, influencers, members of the royal family. Lots of judgment, lots of assumption, and lots of projection. Realistically, what do we really know? The truth be told, we don't know much at all. The fillers of media and publicists, public opinion, our own perceptions, and our own proximity to these people make it impossible for us to know very much at all. Taylor Swift is probably not who you think she is. Neither is Travis Kelce, Kamala Harris, or Prince William. Now take that principle and apply it to your own life. My point is that objectivity matters, but so does perspective. You cannot manage the expectations and the perspective of other people. The sooner you learn that, the happier you will be. Now I want to talk to you about a different kind of story. This is not a story that you'll hear at the dinner table or read in a book. It's not a blockbuster film. It's a story that only you know. It's probably the most significant and influential story you'll ever hear. It's the story you tell yourself, those day-to-day conversations that only you hear. Several years ago, a regional officer from another state came to my home for dinner. And at dinner, I asked each and every one of the officers, what do you plan to do after graduating community college? And for those planning to transfer to a four-year college and university, scholarships and paying for college is a very natural part of that conversation. And anytime I talk transfer to PTK members, I mention the Jack Kent Cooke undergraduate transfer scholarship and encourage them to apply. Now, one student stood out to me, and that same student told me that she'd never consider applying because in her mind, she didn't stand a chance. So if you're telling yourself negative things about yourself, you need to ask yourself, what evidence do I have of that? And to make a long story short, she did apply. She was awarded the Jack Kent Cooke Scholarship. She did attend her dream college, an Ivy League in New York City, and she graduated. And right now, she is in graduate school. Now, what kind of stories was she telling herself to prevent her from applying for one of the biggest and most prestigious scholarships in higher education? That she wasn't smart enough, that she wasn't as deserving as another student? Those stories became what she believed about herself. But more notably, those stories were preventing her from putting herself out there. How many of you can relate? I know I can. Before coming to Phi Theta Kappa, I spent most of my career behind a desk, being a computer programmer and doing institutional research. Now, at the time, I felt like I was knowledgeable and I was good at what I did, but I didn't see myself as the leader of anything, much less a national organization. And when the CEO position at Phi Theta Kappa came open, here are some of the stories I told myself. I'm a single mom. You know, I can't spend all this time building a successful career and take care of my kids. There are people more qualified than me. I'm an introvert. I'm just not outgoing enough. The number one thing I was telling myself is I am not a public speaker. There is no way I would ever be able to sit up there in front of this many people and talk to them. You know, yet here I am. Now, like you, I've spent a lot of my life doing things that I thought would prepare me. I was an honor student like you. I studied hard and I participated in things that I knew would help me grow and learn. But when I took on a leadership role, I really began to realize how much our success happens between our ears and in our thoughts and in our minds. One of the most important skills you will ever practice is how to effectively manage your own personal narrative and how to tell yourself stories about yourself that will move you in the direction that you want to go. Very practically speaking, this is something that I do on a daily basis. And here are a few things that have helped me, and I think they'll help you too. Principle number one, if you do not write your story, someone else will. You are the main character and author of your life story, and no one else has that power over you. Number two, you have the star role and the leading role, and as such, you get control over how you interact with others. This point is about relationships. The key here is to remember you are the main character in your story, but you have a supporting role in the lives of others. You can and should do both. Seeking balance and knowing when to prioritize yourself and knowing when to help those around you. It's important. Principle number three. The most important story you tell is the story you tell yourself. When all is said and done, you're the only person who has to know who you are and what you're about. When you look in that mirror, you have to be happy with the person staring back at you. Now, believing in yourself and trusting that you belong and that you are deserving and yet you are capable, that is the key to success. It's something you don't learn in school, so it's important to me that you learn it in Phi Theta Kappa. You may not be the hero in someone else's story, but you can still be the hero in your own. Phi Theta Kappa, I believe in each and every one of you and the power and potential of your story. Thank you.